today we want to talk about employment in Scotland and how it affects our community and how we can better put ourselves in positions to be employed, and how maybe to get promotions and how to elevate in our careers. Um, and yeah, I would love to know if it was a choice for you to go to Dundee University, or is that the best uni for what you do, or was it closer to home? Like, how did you get to the first decision of thinking you're gonna study in Dundee and do? I take it you studied finance. What is it that you studied?
Yes, I studied finance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like, how did you end up thinking about doing finance? And was there any influences to that? And what are the better ways to getting into finance? We're gonna try and cover that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
Basically, if I were to start with why finance, so I was actually a bit lucky. So the school that I was at, there was I did accounting actually at school in final year of school. There was also economics, and I didn't really like accounting that much. I didn't think I was good at it, and I hated it. I didn't think it was it was that interesting. But everybody else in the year that was doing economics said that economics was really hard. So I knew I wanted to do something business related, but I knew I wasn't going to do accounting because I didn't like it. And I wasn't going to do economics because everybody said it was too hard. So I basically, I think maybe like most people do this, I got all the prospectuses. Well, I got the prospectuses from all the unis that I was thinking of going to. Dundee
Oh,
was just one of them. Not even the ones I thought I was going to, just a bunch of them. I got prospectuses from Edinburgh, Dundee, like everywhere basically.
oh, nice.
And then I went to the business sections to look at the courses in the business sections. And there was a lot of pure economics and there was a lot of accounting and finance, but there wasn't anything that so Dundee was one of the only ones that at the time that was just doing finance. And I thought, okay, it's not economics and it's not accounting. So that seems like a nice little middle ground. I can I can find my way through it. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing that they don't really tell you is that you actually do share a lot of modules from the other places. So as a finance student, I did accounting modules and I did economics modules. And I actually found out that the subject or the part that I was most interested in was actually economics. And
Oh.
I actually didn't find it as hard as people in school were saying it to me. So in hindsight, I'd have probably picked economics instead of
Yes.
finance.
It
So
sounds
don't
like
let other people, yeah, don't let other people's fears dictate what dictate your life. That's lesson number
exactly.
one. Lesson number one.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like it can be maybe more like a stereotype in it to be like, oh, economics, that's hard.
Mm. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's just a stereotype. But just to sidetrack a little bit, in my opinion, economics it's a very out of all the kind of businessy subjects, it's a very interesting story. It's kind of like a cause and effect story. It's like if this happens here, then what happens here? So it's like if interest rates goes up, what happens? If interest rates go down, what happens? And so it's kind of like a story to me. It's like, oh, what if something changes here? What does that impact? And so when you start thinking of it, or when I started thinking of it like that, I didn't find it hard. I didn't find it a problem. So for me, economics was very kind of story based. So that was interesting.
See.
So that's why I picked finance. As to why I picked Dundee, it was a combination of a few things. So I didn't want to. I was in Edinburgh at the time. I didn't want to stay in Edinburgh because when I was going, my whole idea when I was going to uni was that I wanted to go somewhere completely new. I
Oh,
wanted to throw
yes.
myself in a completely different environment where I didn't know anybody and I didn't know the city, because it just opens you up to completely new experiences and new opportunities. It is impossible to go to a city that you don't know and not be confronted with new things.
Mm.
So that was my thought process to go to Dundee. That was one of the main drivers, and I got rejected from some other places as well that I wanted to go to. So that also played a part, right?
Which places did you get rejected to?
So I think, funnily enough, I think Edinburgh rejected me. I think I applied to Aberdeen, but then Aberdeen said that they would treat me like an international student. and then I would have to pay full fees. And I was like,
Oh
nah,
wow.
fam.
I know that.
I was like, nah, you're right. You're right.
Trying to study economics and consuming debt.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, nah. And then I think I was left with, I can't remember all the unis I applied for. I think I applied for maybe 2 in Edinburgh, because I think, interestingly enough, to take a step back, I think in 5th year, I actually applied to uni a year earlier when I was in
Okay.
5th year, and I applied to Stirling. But I basically didn't get into Stirling University. And
yeah.
during 6th year, a lot of my teachers were like, don't just apply to one place, cast your net wide. And in my head, when you're young, you're like, nah, that's where I want to go. That's what I'm going to do. But I mean, the practical approach or the pragmatic approach is, cast your net wide. You don't know necessarily what's going to happen. And so increase your chances.
Yes, yes.
So that's how I ended up in Dundee, and did 4 years there of finance. And then in final year, in 4th year, that was the focus, or the big focus was, as trying to apply for grad jobs.
Oh yeah.
And I think I was talking about this with somebody as well recently. I think I applied to about 30 to 40 different places. I got rejected by every single one apart from one. I got rejected by every single, and it's a bit disheartening, because I think one of the challenges in 4th year is not just the fact that it's final year and it goes to your final degree, but the fact that you're also having to try and apply for jobs whilst you're, doing your course and learning and studying for exams. So that was the hard bit. I was getting rejected left, right, and center. And the the one thing I'll say is that, like, I think, especially in my industry, rejection from offers is like, it comes all the time. Like, rejections are, so you shouldn't let that affect you.
Yeah.
And I can go on and talk about that later in terms of like the career and kind of what I've gone through up until this point, because I've had rejection since then as well.
Yes, please. I don't think I think people need to know about the rejection stories, because especially in today's world, because like all we're just posting is like, oh, we're doing a Zoom podcast, or we're doing this. It's all the achievements that we're doing. It's not showing the failures that people go through. Like you're saying, you had like over 20 job applications and only got one.
Yeah.
And yeah, if that happens to someone who doesn't know that rejection is normal, they can be heartbroken.
Yeah. So like, one of my bits of advice is to not let a rejection knock your confidence, because all it takes is what you're doing when you're applying for jobs is getting the other side to believe that, you are the right person for the job. And
Yes.
sometimes you might get rejected for, whatever reason it might be, but that shouldn't knock your confidence into going through those applications and genuinely believing that you can get that job. And it's easier said than done, right? But that should never knock your confidence in doing that, because all it takes is that one person or that one company to say yes, like that is the guy. And so that's what happened to me. I went through it was a day where they brought the final like 10 or so candidates together, and it was a whole day of interviews and presentations. It was, at the time, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I remember it started at, I think, at 8 in the morning, and it was just non-stop, and then it finished at 4:30. And I remember going back, because I was still at uni at the time, and I remember going back to my flat, and I just fell asleep. It just knocked me out. That whole day knocked me out. And luckily, they hired 3 out of the final 10. And I think a total of 250 people applied. So something like that. But so yeah, keep pushing forward with things like that, and don't let anything shake your confidence. And something as well that I like to say to people is that I think when people are going through a rut, or when people are going through, like tough times or whatever, it's very easy as humans and as individuals. It's very easy as humans and individuals to believe that your current situation is going to be your future situation, i.e., the fact that you're getting rejected a lot now and things aren't going well now, it means that it's going to keep going on into the future. And I genuinely do not believe that is the case. I think
Yes.
life happens in cycles. It's very rare for somebody to live, a perfect life and have no issues. I mean, I've been watching The Crown, right? I've been watching this the royal family, but they
Yes.
still have drama, right? Like
Everyone's got drama.
everyone's got drama. Everyone's got stuff that they're dealing with, and it's very easy when we're in that down cycle to generally think that, you know, it's going to stay like that. Like, what I say is be optimistic, be positive, keep aiming for what you're aiming for, and just keep fighting for what you believe in.
Yes, that's definitely the way it is. And probably because maybe just to add on to what you're saying, it's like people not understanding that failure is not really a bad thing, or like being rejected. It's like life is not straight, and it's like emotions are not linear. So like emotions are liquid. So you have to understand that so is life. It can change, you know, like you can get rejected today and get offered a job by a bigger person tomorrow, or start your own thing. And that's the other thing. It's
that's
like
exactly what happened to me. So like as my career went on, I can maybe talk about it a bit later, but as my career went on, and I wanted to move job,
yes,
I was getting rejected by all these places, and then some bigger names were hiring me. It just made no sense. It made no sense to me.
yeah,
It made no
exactly.
sense. So,
And at times it's all right not for things not to make sense, you know. But then
I think life is a very mystical and interesting thing. I think so I've also said this as well to a couple of people. If somebody came to me right now and said, I could tell you exactly the way your life is going to go for the next 50 years, I wouldn't want to know. I wouldn't want to know, even if the answer was you're going to become a millionaire and you're going to be friends with Jeff Bezos. Like, I wouldn't want to know, because if you knew exactly how your life was going to pan out until, you know, the very last day you were on Earth, that takes out the fun of life. I think part of the fun of life is the fact that I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know the opportunities that are going to come tomorrow, and it's an exciting and very, very fun prospect to know that you can work for what you want and you can actually get there. If somebody told me that right now, that like all the list of things I want to achieve, that, you know, that's going to happen on this day, like, that's boring. You know, like, the mystery of life is that I'm plowing my way forward, I'm making my steps, I'm trying my best, and ultimately I don't really know, but I'm trying. That's my personal opinion. That's my personal view.
I totally will understand too, and agree with that one. It's definitely a personalized thing, and things do change. It's not a straight line, and it's not been a straight line for you being traveling from Dundee to London. You must have been open to such opportunities. And did you ever feel like, especially moving from Dundee, which is like a small factory town or city, to moving to a place like London and going to work for a big organization, what was the psychological effect on that? Did you see any changes in your behavior, maybe?
So I feel like I'm a speed walker now. I have no patience for slow walkers in London. People that don't stand on the right side of the elevator. No, I'm kidding. But so my move. Okay, so I think this would be a good time to segue into kind of my career. So I started this grad job at Dundee. So it wasn't a straight move from Dundee to London. That grad job that I applied for and that I went through all those interviews for, that was supposed to be a 2-year program. But I was actually made redundant 8 months into my 2-year program. So psychologically for me, that was a big hit, because it was supposed to be 2 years. 8 months in, you know, this is my first entry into working life, right? I'm ready to bleed the colors of the company. You know, you're excited as a grad. You have that energy, like, yes, I'm in. I finally made it through. And then they told me that, hey, sorry, we're letting you go like 8 months in. I'm like, what's going on? And it was especially tough for me because I think so for finance, so for the grad jobs that open in September, you have to apply for it the previous November. So basically my last day, or I was let go in April of that year. So that meant that I couldn't apply for that coming summer's grad roles because I was way too late. But then it also meant that I would have had to wait from that April to that November before I could apply for the following summer's grad roles. And I was like, I can't I can't do that. I've just made my first step in. I can't just, waste time doing nothing. And then to compound to that, I was applying for all these experienced higher roles, and I wasn't getting them because they were all saying you need minimum 2-3 years. And I'm sending off emails like, look, I know you're looking for someone with 2-3 years. I've only got 8 months. Like, this wasn't my fault.
Oh, yes.
All this, and I was getting rejected. Honestly. And so I kept pushing and I kept pushing. And then one of the graduates that was in the same year as me, she knew somebody that was working in Glasgow at Morgan Stanley, which is an investment bank. And she said, oh, this is the recruiting company that he was able to get the job with. So she was like, get in touch with that recruiting company. So I got in touch with the recruiting company. They're like, hey, there's this role. We can set you up for some interviews. Do you want to go? I was like, yeah, sure. So I went for the interviews. The interview went really well. And then I get a message, I think maybe about a week later or a few days later, and they said they absolutely loved you. They had nothing wrong with you, but they chose somebody else that had more experience than you. And I was like, come on. It's like, again, I was like, so I was close. I was like, again, this happened. And then they messaged me again, I think a couple of days later, and they said that the interview that I did, even though they didn't hire me, they liked me so much that they actually referred me to another team that had an open position. So she asked me to go back to Glasgow for another interview with the other team. So I ended up going back, had an interview with them, and they hired me.
Amazing.
Exactly. So that I was like, okay, finally, yes. So I got hired as a temp worker, contract worker. And it was great because I was like, okay, cool. I'm now back, I'm back in something that's stable, it's good. I learned a lot from that role. But also as well, it was also a bit tough for me because, it almost felt like a demotion as well, because I've gone from a graduate who had, 2 years on track, and there were certain things that, are planned for you as a graduate.
Yes.
And all of a sudden I'm a temporary worker, I don't have all the benefits of a permanent worker, basically I'm not as special in this place. So it was kind of like emotion. And all my friends from uni, a lot of them had already gone down to London straight after graduation. They were working in these like big companies. And so I'm comparing myself to them, and like, they're already in London. I've almost backtracked in a way,
yes.
in a weird way.
Yes.
And so I was like, so one thing that I decided to do and really focus on is it's really important sometimes to not compare yourself to people around you. I think people have different speeds at which they go through things, and people have different ways in which they go through things and go through life. And I think sometimes it's okay to occasionally, every now and again, just see where you are. But I think it can be very detrimental to people in general to just constantly compare themselves to somebody else. I think it's okay to do that every now and again, but it shouldn't be your only focus. I think focus on yourself, focus on where you are, and you decide whether you are happy for where you are at that point, given your circumstances.
Yes. I think there's a problem there in it, self-comparison, comparing your journey to other people. And yeah, maybe that's like something very, very toxic when you're trying to move on and move up in your workplace or whatever profession it is. But then looking at other people's situation and thinking they've got better cooperatives, they've got better gigs, or they've got better producers. So there's always gonna be that. So it's probably like being aware as a person to be like, you have got your own journey. There's probably someone who's also looking at you thinking, he's doing all right, or she's doing all right. It's like, no, they don't know your journey and they don't know your story on the inside out. They're probably just seeing, the picture perfect in their head though.
Yeah, exactly. 100% agree with you.
I've got a question to ask. I've got two brothers, one who's in their final year doing accountancy, and the other one is in their second year doing engineering. So I think harder for Black boys than it was for me. Well, that's what I think, and I don't know if it's because they're younger than me. You seem to have gone through a lot of setbacks, but you just remain committed and resilient to make sure you get to where you want to go. So do you think your family had any influence in that, or what gave you that resilience to think, right, I have this goal, I'm just going to go for it. I'm not going to look at what my neighbors are doing. How did you get through that?
Yeah, so the one thing I will say is that I have a very supportive family, and I am incredibly lucky and blessed to have that. My mum has always, thought the world of me and always thought that I can really achieve anything that I put my mind to. So since I've been young, she's always believed that, whatever I really set my mind to, I can do. And I think that's set a very good foundation and a good base. I mean, sometimes you're going to be in positions where that base is, shaken a little bit. You're going to be in situations, maybe at work or where whatever setting you're in, where somebody contradicts the confidence in yourself for whatever reason. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you've done something wrong. But sometimes that gets shaken. But you should try as much as you can to still have that confidence in yourself that you can actually do what you set out to do. I think luckily for me, my family have been very supportive of me. Not that, I call them all the time and they say this, but I know that I've got that. I know that I've got that.
Always on
I've
speed
got
dial.
but I know that I can get them, and they can help me out. And I know my mom has been incredibly supportive of me as well. And sometimes when, let's say I'm at a fork in the road, I might not necessarily know what to do, or I'm just thinking about what is right, what is not right. I will ask their opinion. I will go to them and I'll say, what do you think? I want your opinions here. And so I think I'm very lucky in that regard. I think that has helped me have a certain level of confidence in myself. And again, having that level of confidence doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be confident, but at least I feel like I have that base where I can say, yes, I can actually do this.
So for those that don't have that help from their family, we talked about this on our last talk there. So there is help you can get from either school career advisors or university. So did you use any of these facilities, and how was that any help to you at all?
So actually, yes. So when I was applying for my graduate roles in my final year of university, when I was applying for the job that I did get, what I was doing was that every stage we had she was kind of like a guidance counselor for career. She was like a careers guidance counselor. And I'd never really used guidance counselors before, but for some reason I decided that for this one I wanted to speak to her about this. So at every stage, before every stage of the interview process, because there were various stages throughout it, so it went over a couple of months. Before every interview and before everything, I would go up to her and I would say, "This is what's coming up. This is what I think. This is how I think I'm going to approach it. What do you think?" And so she was giving me tips throughout the whole process. So, for example, there's something called an assessment day, and that assessment day is that day where they put the final 10 people together, and so there's group workshops. And something she said to me which stuck with me, and she said, one thing that you want to really get out, show in that group workshop is that you are a team player. You cannot be the person that's too quiet, and you can't be the person that's too loud. You need to be in the middle. And you need to be, if you see someone's too quiet, be the one to say, "Hey, do you have anything that you want to contribute?" Be the one to try and get something out of them. And if you think that somebody is too much, say, "Oh, do you think anyone else, has an opinion?" And she said, finding that middle ground is what they want, because a lot of people come in guns blazing, trying to outshine everybody, but that's also not exactly what they're looking for. And another really good piece of advice that I got as well, this is a very specific piece of advice, but she also said, in the group workshops, always, because your time, so you got 10 minutes to look at this document and come up with a solution of whatever problem it is. One of the pieces of advice I got was, first thing that you do is nominate yourself as the time manager.
Yeah.
I was like, why? Like, what does that make? What difference does that make? Nominating yourself as a time manager makes you the leader of the team without telling people that you're the leader of the team.
Yes.
Because every 5 minutes you go, hey guys, we've only got five minutes has gone by. Like, we need to have sorted this out by then. Come on, does anyone have? So, and then 10 minutes go by, and then like, oh, we've only got a minute left. So it keeps you, it keeps you on track.
Yes.
So that was another good piece of advice. I know it's a very specific piece of advice, but going back to what you were saying before, I think if there are places in schools or like councils and things like that, people that you can go to for help with that are outside of the family, definitely do that. I think that is really good, and that can really help you a lot, because a lot of these people have life experience that you may not necessarily have. Like, even though I'm still pretty young, and there's still a lot of things that I don't know, and I can still reach out to people. So even in my current job, I still have mentors. I still have people that I go to and say, oh, hey, is this is what I'm facing right now at work. What do you think I should do about this, or how do you think I should approach this? So I think it's always good to have that. And as well, especially, I think if you don't have that family network as well, I think it is then more important for you as an individual to really focus on yourself and really build yourself up as a person and your mindset.
Yes.
I think spend a lot more time within yourself, thinking about what you want to do, building up the confidence in yourself and what you want to achieve, planning it, and making sure that you have your back. Because if you unfortunately don't have that support network, you then have to be extra motivated and empowered in yourself. And so, it's not that you have to necessarily do it every night, but do take time in your life to introspectively look at yourself and say to yourself, yes, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, and basically empower yourself to do that if you don't have that support network to help you.
Yes. So, and like in terms of like talking about outside mentorships besides family, how hard is it to get like mentorship in your field of work? Like, is it pretty something that is accessible? Is it something that we can improve on as a community?
So I would imagine different industries will do things slightly differently. I think at least in finance, there's usually in whatever company you go to some sort of mentorship program that you can opt into. So usually if you join, a company, there'll be a part of their website, and if you want to have a mentor, you can put your name down and they can find you a mentor. But something else that I found quite interesting is that if you're in a certain environment and you build relationships with the people around you of all levels, you can really go up to anybody and say, hey, like I really want a mentor. Would you be happy to be my mentor? It is very hard for somebody to be approached, to be asked to be a mentor, and for them to say no.
Yes.
And for the most part, people feel if someone approaches somebody to be their mentor, that person that's approached feels a sense of responsibility at that point. They feel that, hey, this person actually looks up to me, and they do think that there is some value I can attribute, I can help them with, I can give them. And honestly, it's very rare for somebody to actually say no. So what I would say is look at the people in your life, look at the people that are around you. And if you genuinely think that this person can have positive input in your life, just message them, go up to them and just say, hey, looking for a mentor. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to speak to them every day, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but just knowing that, you can reach out to somebody if you have a question, you're not sure what to do, that you've got somebody you can actually go to and say, hey, what do you think? But definitely look at your network, look at who's around you, and approach. If you generally think that they can help you, approach them and ask them.
Absolutely.
They won't say no. I pretty much guarantee you they won't say no.
Yes.
I think with what you said earlier on as well, when you were made redundant, you had a friend that give you that contact. So I think networking is another way that people that don't have that family or links to these kind of facilities that they can go through as well.
Definitely. And I think that would also come naturally. I think if you are a genuinely nice person and in the interactions you have with people, you are yourself and you're not, you're not someone that's, ridiculous. People will be drawn to you and people will, befriend you. And when you build up that network, it becomes very easy to, because let's say at work, whatever your work is, you build a network and you start to know a couple of people, then you end up starting knowing the people that they know. And then when you become to know them, then you know the people that they know. And so it always grows. And so it is always a good idea to be nice to the people around you. I think I'm lucky in the sense that my mom has taught me to be a pleasant person throughout my life. So
It helps.
definitely, yeah, it helps. So be nice to the folk around you. It will help you. It can only help you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, can I quickly say something? Just it feels a bit like being in the creative field where it's literally just if as long as you can get your foot through the door, it is just about being nice to people and people liking you. So I mean, you can be good at what you do, but if no one likes you, no one is going to help you out when you need the help. So it feels a bit like that. Like there isn't too much separation between like working in finance and then working in the arts, shall we say?
Yeah.
Just be yourself and be genuine. I think that's the way people would like you, instead of looking at grades, thinking, right, okay, I need to know this director. Just be genuine and people will like you.
Yeah.
But also, if there, so another interesting thing in the workplace, another tip that I was told was a good way to in this now going into the promotions part of what you asked about earlier, a good way to climb that ladder is to basically connect with your manager and find out what's important to your manager. Like, what are the things that is important to the manager? Because you got to remember, your manager is also trying to get promoted. So for your manager to get promoted, they need their team needs to be looking good and be achieving certain things that they can go to their manager and say, look at what my team has done. Look at what I've helped them do. Help me promote them. So the more you help your manager look good, the more he's likely to, or he or she is likely to back you into getting that promotion yourself. And so a good tip is find out what your manager is concerned about, or the focus areas for your manager, and try and target those focus areas. So another tip that I think a few people have said a few times is the perception of you is actually more important than what you're doing. So you'll have it where that's why you'll see sometimes people that are maybe getting promoted and you might sit there and think to yourself, well, why am I going to get promoted, whatever. The perception of you is very important, and especially to people that don't interact with you on a daily basis. If I know somebody that works on a different part of the company, and all I know about them is that they're really, really good, like, oh my goodness, they're amazing, that is just my perception of them. I've never actually really worked with them, but the perception of them has already fed through to me. So I think as well, another important thing is be aware of the perception. This is getting a little bit more kind of like political, because sometimes in these, you gotta maneuver your way around. But the perception of you is very important, because if everybody perceives you to be bad but you're actually good, then that's not going to help you, because all these other people are the ones that are making the decisions to promote you or whatever. So that's another important thing to realize.
Yes, it's kind of like the image that you have, like in the arts, like it sounds very linear to our industry too. It's like you have to be nice. You know, all these tips that you're giving, they can be really applied to many other industries that people work in.
There was a question. There was that from you, Manu. Oh, you're on mute.
very good with this technology either. I was never quite sure where to direct the questions, whether I should send it to David and whether he's going to see it or not, or whether just to put it to everybody. So I put it for everybody, so anybody can answer that. But yeah, mostly any advice from David. I kind of thought, be quite interesting to hear, because this podcast is also very much focused on how people of color have to sort of push themselves through in the workplace, and what kind of difficulties they may come across, and what kind of mental or mindset to have when they're faced with any challenges.
Yeah, so I think recently there's been a lot of kind of ongoing conversations around that topic as well. I think, with the recent movements of, like especially the Black Lives Matter, I think there's been a lot more conversations that are being had at various companies on this topic. And one thing that we've spoken about is having a place of work wherein, if somebody, let's say somebody of color, doesn't feel that they're getting the promotion, or doesn't feel that they're getting the praise that they deserve for whatever the work that it is that they're doing, and someone else is maybe coming up for that, I think it's very important to call your manager out and have expectations of the manager. So you say, let's say, if we take an example where someone has been promoted, you haven't been promoted, you will then go to your manager and say, okay, can you tell me why this person did and why I didn't? And then if that's the case, and then like, if they got promoted because of that and I didn't, then what do I need to do? You tell me what do I need to do? What do I need to achieve in the next year, or whatever it is, to get to the point where I can be promoted? And start to hold your manager accountable and say, so your manager should then also be a mentor and say, okay, this is how we need to get you to where you need to go. And at various points throughout the year, check in and say, how am I doing? How am I doing? Am I on track? Am I on track? And get those responses from your manager. Your manager might not necessarily say you are going to get promoted, because there are other people involved in that decision, but they should tell you that you are on track, they are not on track. And that should be a very good indicator for you. And secondly, if they keep telling you that you're on track, if you then not get promoted, it's going to look very bad on them. So if they've been telling you you're on track the whole year, when it comes to those decision-making meetings at the senior level, at that point, it befalls on them to really push your name out. And it benefits them as well to push your name out, because you have basically they've been working with you the whole year to get to a level that you believe that they're apt to get promoted. So now they have to fight for you in those meetings for that promotion. So a good point is to hold the people that are above you accountable to a degree, and say, like, look, I've done everything that you've asked me. What more can I do? What more do you want me to do? So I think the more you hold your managers accountable, the more you'll get out of it.
Yes. And another question that I had was in the lines of in your industry, do you find that there is like the diversity? Is there enough Black people? Do you have Black mentors, for example? And how easy is it for you to access things as a Black man working in the finance industry in London? I mean, it's pretty good that you're in London, because I know London is diverse. I couldn't imagine that, and being in an office in Glasgow.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a very big question, and I've had discussions about this as well, and so it's okay. So when you think about, let's say, the number of Black people or the number of ethnic minorities that are hired into a place, I don't think is necessary. So I think I'll preface this by saying that there is an underrepresentation, but not necessarily. It's not, the underrepresentation is not necessarily in all areas. The underrepresentation is in certain areas of finance. So you will realize that for some of the kind of maybe middle and back office functions, and the middle and back office functions are those are the kind of teams and roles that kind of keep things going. It's not, if you think traditional finance and you think your traders, your investors, that's front office. So that's quote unquote the nice side of the exciting part. So there's a lot more underrepresentation on that side of finance than there is on the middle to back office. The middle to back office is things like technology teams, operations, that type of stuff. So there is a disparity between that. There's also a disparity on the levels. So there's less ethnic minority or Black representation at the senior level. And in finance as a whole, there is an underrepresentation, but it's really interesting. And I think that it drills down a lot further down. And so I'll start by saying this. I think if you were to look at the percentage, if you were to look at the percentage of people, Black people in finance as an example, I don't think it's accurate to say, oh, okay, if there's 10% Black people in the finance industry and there's 10% people in the UK, that is a good like number to base it on. I don't think that's true. I think if you were to drill into the numbers, I think that you'll find that there's probably less people in finance because there's probably less people applying for finance. And then if you look at the question as to why are there less Black people applying for finance, then is it because there's less people going into uni to study these subjects to then get these jobs? And then if you drill down to the answer of that question, like if that's the case, then at the school level, do ethnic minorities and Black people, do they feel that they have a chance to even go to uni and study these things? And if they don't, then the question becomes, how do Black people and people that are, so a lot of these people will probably actually, if we're being very honest, maybe come from maybe worse off backgrounds than maybe some of the people on their white counterparts. And so they're probably not going to as good schools as some of these other people. So maybe are known really being taught or shown that they can actually go into finance and work for an investment bank. So then is the solution that you go to the grassroots level, you go to the children, you go to the young kids, you like, for example, as an example, something like this Zoom call, and you go into schools and you speak to them and you say, hey, look, have you even thought about going into finance and going into the industry? Because I'm a representation of what you can achieve. But sometimes maybe they don't even see that. They don't see that there is somebody that they can, oh, wow, like this person has actually gone to finance. And so let's say we did that. We went into all these, quote unquote, not as good schools. We actually showed these kids that, hey, you can be like me, you can go into finance. It is an option. Like, you can go to uni, you're good enough and all that. Then you might have more people that do those courses at university. You then might have more people that apply for it. And then you probably have better representation. Because one of the things that we were discussing was that, because some managers will say that they might want to hire more Black people and be more diverse, but they're not getting them through to them. They're not getting these CVs through because there's probably not as many people applying. So I think there's a lot of questions that needs to be answered. But I think ultimately, that a big portion of it goes down to the very, very young ages. And do these people think that they have an opportunity or a chance to even enter an industry like that?
Yeah. So I suppose, sorry, you started breaking up in the middle of talking then.
Oh,
but then
sorry.
But what I was thinking is, so like, if you reckon there isn't enough young people who are like motivated to do these things and to get into the field of finance and maybe accounting, how do we then as a community help the young people to get into the finance world? Because there is important jobs that will be helpful for our Black community if someone from our background was in some of these positions. And I don't know, like, for me, like, I think you are the third person I know who works in finance, and only one in Glasgow and two are in London. So it's kind of like really interesting. And I know a lot of it has got to do with mentality, because that's what it all comes down to, self-belief. And like you obviously have that in yourself, and you can't really afford to have self-doubt when you want to elevate into other things. And like, yeah, I think like I'm always interested in, if the case is that there's not enough numbers, how do we get these numbers in? Do we need to start programs in the community? Do we need to, do you know what I mean? Like, I want to know
Yeah.
how we can change that.
I think that is the big question. How do we improve ourselves and how do we get better? I think that there are possibly a few different answers and a few different approaches to this. For me personally, I would agree with you in the sense that I think having programs to target the younger generation is going to have one of the biggest effects. I think again, saying like Zooms like this, conversations like this, with people, I think broadens people's knowledge and it broadens their horizons. I think so. Some like in school, I remember sometimes, let's say somebody will come in from a company and speak,
Mm.
and sometimes, let's say they're there for 2 hours, right? You might not remember anything they say for those 2 hours apart from one sentence that just hits home. I know that's happened to me where somebody from external will come in, literally don't remember anything, but there'll be a sentence that will just stick with me and just will never leave me. And so as an adult going into those situations, you don't know how much you're actually helping these kids. Because I've been involved in a mentoring program at a school in Brixton in London, and
Oh,
we're
yes.
basically doing this exact thing. We're going to them, we're trying to help them think about their careers, think about what they want to do. One, first of all, tell them, finance is an option, but also for any other thing that they want to go into, to try and help them kind of navigate that and get to where they want to get them to where they want to get to. And I think we have a much bigger effect on younger people than I think maybe is believed. Because sometimes I've been to the school a few times, and sometimes I'll leave and it's like, well, did I even help? Did I, did I even do anything? But it's very hard to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's really important, especially when you're talking about going into schools, and like the importance of like Zoom discussions like this and putting them into a wider audience. Um, you guys in London have got quite a lot of that. Like, you can get like lots of podcasts. Like, you've got like Chucky Online, you've got Halfcast, you've got The Receipts. Like, these are like really podcasts run by like Black people and like really relevant to Black people. And why I'm just mentioning that, because you go into schools, I know I'm more attentive to someone who is probably older than me or who looks similar to me.
Yeah.
So like, as you know, it might just be something minor that other people don't really see, but then it's really important that you are going into these schools and you are a Black man and people are saying that, oh, he's actually young and he's in finance. And it's the same thing. It's important that we're probably doing this and being the only one in Scotland doing something of this small podcast. But then it's so important because you are then layering a foundation of information, which is what people really don't have. Like, the information is not filtered. So like,
Yes.
it's really important that we're having these discussions and that you are going into these schools and doing and asking people like, are you know that this is possible? And if not, then it's actually much more easier to reference them to something like a podcast like Chucky Online or a podcast like this, to be like, oh, here you go. But then what it brings, it just brings these archives of things,
Yeah.
of documentation that has never really been happening in our culture. And yeah, I really love that. And I really love the idea of just exposing yourselves into like different things like you have done yourself.
Like for me, I really like to get involved because I know the impact that it can have, and I know the impact that it would have had on me as well.
Yes.
And so I really like getting involved because, these are very important things to people. Things like this can change people's lives. It really, really can. Whether you know it or not, it genuinely can alter the direction of someone's life. And I want to actually make a positive difference in the community as much as I can. So that's why I'm always very, very happy to, I feel that I'm very blessed to get to the position that I am. And I feel that it would be very wrong of me to not try and help other people also, not necessarily just in finance, but in whatever it is that they're involved in, to also make that jump and make that step. That's not to say I'm perfect, and that's not to say that my life is
Yes.
the best thing since sliced bread, but you know, I want to help people as well that also want to, you know, do better for this.
I've just got a quick question. Oh, sorry, Fatma, you go ahead.
Oh, mine is just a long, convoluted one. When we were talking about the lack of representation, I think this is everywhere and it's very noticeable. So, for example, let's say you go into a store like Primark, you would see the sales assistants are from BAME backgrounds or people from less well-off backgrounds, and then people in higher positions are people Caucasians or people from well-off backgrounds. I think if I was to look back, I think sometimes we ourselves need to take ownership of that and just think, why am I not going into that position? Is it because I'm not seeing someone that looks like me? But why is that stopping me from trying to get there and become that example? So I think for us to be able to move on, we ourselves need to take that ownership and make that change instead of waiting for David or wait for Manu to be like, oh, I'll just stand back and watch. So I think that's one step. The other thing that you were saying about going to schools and doing this kind of stuff, my experience, I think, was there isn't that much information you have at the time when you're choosing a job. So at that point, when I was at school, it was like, okay, do you want to be a lawyer, a doctor? I didn't know that you could work for the ambulance. You could be I knew about nurses. I didn't know about radiography. There's all these different roles that you don't know about. And if you are someone that's different, let's say myself and Lorna, that wants to go into the arts, you get people in your ear telling you, right, you need to manage your expectations. Have you seen any Black person in River City, for example, where we're in Scotland?
You have said
so
it.
Things like these are in your ears and you're like, oh God, right, okay, I can't be an actress. Let me go through the academic route. And then you go through that route, and also you're facing that same thing where you don't see people that look like you. I think as long as you take ownership, be like, okay, this is what I want to do. Let me learn more about it. How can I get in there? Right, okay, there's no one that looks like me, but this person is really good at it. Let me go and ask them, how did they manage to get to that position? And that's the route that I went to. And now I'm a taxman.
We love the taxman.
I think what you said, it's summarized in a quote that is, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're saying. Be the difference that you want to see. And that's not to say that if you are the first person that's going to make that change, it's probably going to be harder than everybody else that follows you. But you are the one that's going to pave the way to allow other people to look up to you and say, she was able to do it, I can do it as well. And so I think that is, I 100% agree with you. Just because you don't see that representation should not stop you from getting that. And I think I've been lucky, and in the sense that I've never thought about things that way. I've never thought to myself that, oh, I don't see any Black people in this place or this level, therefore I don't think I'm good at it. I would go for it regardless. So the color should not, your color and your ethnicity should not become a mitigating factor as to why you should achieve something that you want to achieve. And yes, it might be harder if you're going to be the first person to do it, but then pave that way for the other people. So yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that I think you just kind of have one of those strong minds that does really notice that sort of thing. Because I think for me, it had a real big subconscious effect on me when I wasn't seeing people who looked like me, especially in the creative parts, because I'm a very sort of rational person. I love having order. I love having routine, and being a creative is the exact opposite. of that. So it's a bit like, oh no, what do I do? What if it all goes wrong? And so that was what took me so long. Part of what took me so long to getting into what I really wanted to do, because it's so different to what my personality type really is. But yeah, it's always good to be around people who are just natural trailblazers, because even I, over the years, have learned a lot from David. Not just about jobs, but like when you see how he thinks through things, I'm like, oh, that's a way that I can do that. That's better than what I was gonna do. So it's good to be around people who want to get somewhere. It's important who you surround yourself with.
I also learned from Lorna as well. I learned from her as well.
That's amazing. At least everyone is learning from each other then.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to ask a question actually, Dav. I don't think I know this. What did you want to do before you realized that you could go into finance? Because I'm pretty sure no kid thinks of finance until like a certain point.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think when I was much younger, you might remember this actually. When I was much younger, I originally wanted to be a pilot.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of flying still gets me. I actually love being in planes. It's actually very annoying because Lorna's like the opposite. So I love being in a plane, but it's really annoying because I usually end up falling asleep because I get so comfortable.
Hey, David, have you tried gliding? If you like flying,
Lighting.
What?
gliding.
Oh, gliding.
Yeah.
No.
I would try it.
Yeah.
It would be a very big step, but I would love to try it.
I mean,
Mate,
yeah, you should try it. You should try it. If you like the heights, then that's a more personal one, You're not polluting.
Yeah,
you're still thrusting.
That's a bit too real.
You want it diluted a little bit.
Yeah.
Just give me the lemon, but
for
make
some
it
reason,
lemonade.
But yeah, it's really weird. Like I love being in planes, but when I'm in a plane, I usually just feel really comfortable.
Yes.
I usually just feel so comfortable, so I usually just fall asleep, and then I tend to just wake up after the plane journey. So I wake up and I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, I've missed the whole journey.
Amazing.
Maybe a co-pilot, not the actual pilot. I wouldn't get on that plane.
Yeah.
It's like that's one of the jobs we cannot afford to have you sleep.
Else you'll definitely be waking up at the end of your journey.
Yeah. It's playing Russian roulette. Are we gonna wake up or are we not gonna wake up? But the other thing that got raised was the environment and who you hang around with and all these things. And that's actually another important one that I really want to talk about, because I know for myself, I don't know about everyone else, but if I'm in a location or a house or just a building, and if I just don't feel that if the environment is not settling for me, I'm not productive. And that also goes to like people. Like I can walk into a room, and if someone has got bad energy on that day, it just washes it down because of that environment. So it then, for me personally, just made me very worried about who I'm around, who I'm spending a cup of tea with. But then it's always just because of in my head, I know that my environment really affects me a lot. And it even goes to like things like mental health, like if I'm in a place where it's not good, my mental health just declines. I can feel it. I'm like, okay, this is not the environment for me. And I want to know how, if you realize that at a younger age, because I think most people don't realize energy and how these things work till they're kind of like older, and maybe it's a bit late, they've done wrong things in their lives. And yeah, so I don't know how everyone else has navigated this, the thing of surrounding yourself and being in an environment that helps you grow.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you raised. The environment that you're in, the people that you surround yourself with, and the people that you interact with, is a very, very big contribution to how you are as a person and how effective you can be. To take it one step further as well to what you mentioned is sometimes in the work setting you are going to be placed in an environment that might not be conducive to you. You might be working with people that, you know, just as you say, are just not good for your personal space, but you're going to still have to work with them. And so then the question becomes, how do you effectively do that? And then that's, you know, that's another, you know, challenging part of life, and working with people in general. You know, wherever you go, it's, you know, it's likely that you're not going to be friends with everybody that you're going to be working with.
Yes.
So being able to maneuver situations, let's say recognizing the people that maybe do not contribute to the positivity of your mental health, and just recognizing them first of all, and recognizing that they shouldn't have an impact on that, and so trying as much as you can to not let them have a negative impact on yourself. And whether that be you know, maneuvering certain conversations and situations. You know, you might have to change the way you interact with this type of person. I'm not saying like, you know, treat them badly or whatever, but you know, just in the type of way that you interact with this person, you might have to tweak that a little bit. So that's one of those like ongoing processes. But I think going back to what you're saying, you should definitely surround yourself and be in an environment where you think you can be effective, and usually like-minded people that are on the same journey as you or want to get to the same place as you are it's always a good place to start. But in the instances where you are going to be in a situation where you don't have that luxury of having the environment that you want, being able to figure out what is wrong and having a plan to try and navigate that. It's not easy. I'm still learning how to do it, you know. And so yeah, I think that's another one of those challenges of life that we try and work around.
I
Yes,
think
I like that.
one of the things that I'm someone that likes to observe things and just be like, why do people think like that? So, for instance, I stay in Castlemilk, which is a very, I would say, what's the political way of saying this? A bit out of a deprived area. So if you stay around here, the conversation people have is like, oh, why can't we get a job? Why yeah, the people that have houses, the people that drive Mercedes, that brings you down as well. And if you look at the background that I'm from, being a Black person, I was part of like a development program that aims to try and get people from the BAME background into senior positions. What I found about being in that environment, instead of if you listen to the conversations around you, people were saying things like, oh, I've got a degree, but I'm not getting a job because I'm Black. Or people, the way people talk to me is because I'm Black. But when you look at it,
That's
it's
this
not
victimization thing.
it's not always because you're Black. It's not always because you come from a deprived background. It's the way you are, and that's the way I just navigate my way through life. Yes, I'm from Castle. Yes, I'm Black, but I am Fatma.
Yes, yeah, we're only individual.
Yeah. So I think that's the way I control my mental health. I don't let other people thinking, right, okay, because I'm Black, I should lower myself down. Because I'm from Catholic, I should lower myself down. That's how I navigate through it.
Yes, it's a very nice way to navigate it, Fatma.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think it goes back to having that confidence in yourself and saying, you know who you are, you know what you're worth, and you know what you're trying to achieve, and you shouldn't let people alter that. I think yes, we're Black, we're from ethnic minorities, and sometimes there will be that, there might be that maybe like not racism, maybe there is going to be some racism, or maybe there's going to be something that happens because of that, but ultimately, like, you are you should have confidence in yourself, and if you do recognize that it's because of that and it's because of that, then you know how to address that. But I think going back to what you're saying, not everything is because it's not everything, let's say, that bad that happens is necessarily because you're Black. And so I think that's a very good point to raise as well.
And I would say for the young people that are on this, it's not like um I would say that I'm very confident that I don't let things get to me. I would say when I was about 17 or 18, I was influenced by that, thinking, oh, I'm Black. Oh, I didn't get that job because I'm a Muslim. Next time I go to the interview, I'm not going to wear a headscarf. What happened? I went to the interview. I was extra nervous. I didn't get the job because I wasn't being myself. So I think you are going to go through this kind of situation where you question your background, but you will navigate your way around it and find your way. So don't be discouraged just because you're hearing us saying your confidence, that will grow in time.
Do you know what I was thinking, Fatma? I was thinking that you're going to say you met a Muslim lady instead doing the interviews on the day you went in.
Oh, you get that as well. You meet a Muslim lady and you think, oh, this person's from the same background as me, I'm going to get the job.
Yeah, exactly. Or the one time you didn't wear your whole piece and you go in, remove your scarf, and it's actually a Muslim person interviewing you. Then you regret not being you.
We all go through this when we're young, and then you learn to be yourself.
Yeah, identity is something that you learn as you're growing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been nice. I've really, if anyone has got any other questions, you can fire them out.
I've got a question here. Who would you say inspires you? It can be a celebrity, family member.
It's interesting. A friend of mine asked me this a few months ago. I don't tend to look at celebrities for inspiration. My inspiration, this might seem a bit of a cop-out, but my inspiration tends to come from different places. The main place that my inspiration comes from is actually from myself and my drive. I'll be completely honest with you. My main inspiration is my idea of where I want to be. Yeah. That is the first place that my inspiration comes from, my own personal goals for myself. Then the second place that I think it comes from is from the people that are around me that I trust. So like my mentors, for example. So I do have a mentor. He's another Black individual, and he's very, in my opinion, he's basically kind of where I want to be. Like he has reached where I want to be. And so sometimes when I see him and speak to him, it gives me confidence as well personally that he's been able to achieve so much, and it's something that I can also do, and I have it very well in me to do. So it's kind of like him mentoring me in that sense. Yes. And so the people that are around me and the networks that I've built up for myself are also my inspiration in terms of, because they kind of help to tune me to where I'm trying to get to. And I think next as well is genuinely my family. I think my family helped me so much, and they have so much belief in me and have so much faith in me that it genuinely does help me in the times, let's say, where I don't feel that I've been as effective, or I don't feel that I've been as good as good as I maybe wanted to be. They definitely do support me in that. So yeah, I would say first of all myself and my idea of what I want to achieve, then my friends around me and my network as well around me that help support me, and then also my family as well that bring that base level of support where I know that regardless. So like work is work, right? Like life is life, but like at least I know that my family have also got me. If right now I quit work, my family are here for me. So I'm blessed to have that base. But yeah, that's my answer to that question, really.
I've got another one. So we talked about going, you gain your position going through the academic route. So let's say, for example, in finance, is there a way to get into it without having a degree? Have you got any colleagues that have that background, or do you need a degree to get into it?
being honest with you, I really believe that you do need a degree to get into finance. It's obviously going to be dependent on the firm or the place that is going to hire you. But I've never really seen or really heard an example, not to say that they don't exist, and especially with the bigger companies, like the really big companies, they will like a degree is kind of like minimum. But I remember there was an article a couple of years ago. It was one of the accounting firms. I think it was KPMG. I think they said, because usually the base limit is a 2-1. That's usually the base limit. But I remember the KPMG basically said a couple of years ago, I don't know if it still exists, that they were taking 2-2s. Like they would still people with 2-2s would still be interviewed. And I remember that was the first time that was like, whoa, like in that industry, they're going to say that. So, but yeah, unfortunately, I think for finance, a degree is needed. But again, that's not to say that you can't. But the thing is, things have gotten tougher and tougher every year. You're having more people applying for jobs, and the competition is getting fiercer and fiercer, and so the requirements are getting harder and harder. It's harder for like it is harder for people now than it was when I tried to get in. I remember I was speaking at Morgan Stanley. I was speaking to my manager at the time, and I remember he was saying that because he was great at his job. He was an incredible manager and he was so knowledgeable. He was the guy that if anybody had a question, he would have the answer to. And I remember I was talking to him once and he said that if he applied for that job, for the grad job in his team, this in this season, he wouldn't get it. Because I think I can't remember what grade he got, but he just said that the competition is just so fierce now, and so I think they keep raising the requirements, keep raising the bar, and I think that's why it's also important, like what we're talking about going into these schools and going into these environments to target that, because if that is the path that they want to take, then you can say, okay, then you need a degree, and then if you're going to get this degree, like these are the steps you need to take to get there. So that's why I think it's very important to try and tackle things that at the younger ages and at the younger levels to prepare people's minds for the future. Like, for example, I know that there are some courses at uni. I can't remember which ones, but I know that there's some courses at uni that you can only do if you've studied certain subjects at school. But sometimes those subjects, are maybe going to be, let's say, in like maybe your 5th and 6th year. So, but to study those subjects in 5th and 6th year at higher and advanced higher level, you needed to have taken I think Scotland has moved from standard grade now. I can't remember what you guys are doing now, but you need to have taken those courses before that. And so sometimes there's a lot of backtracking. It's like, actually, before I can do that at uni, I actually need to have done this and this at these different points. And so it's important to try not make that decision too late. And it's tough because, sometimes kids don't necessarily know what they want to do at certain ages. But that's why it's good to broaden. Exactly. That's why it's good to broaden their horizons and say, look, this is possible. Is this something that you'd be interested in? And so I think it's been tougher and it gets tougher as the years go by. But I would personally say that is not a reason why you can't get in. Your path in might be different. And so let's say applying from a graduate level might not be the way in, but I think still, if that is your aim, you can still plan and say, if I don't have a degree, maybe it's a good idea for me to get experience in here, and then your path might be different, but I still think it's possible.
That's a bit way too deep for everyone, David.
Yeah.
You know how to make a room go silent. I'm here.
I was just thinking about it. So from the HMRC way, you don't have to have it is finance, it's different kind of finance. There is a way to get through without having a degree. So I was just wondering to see whether that's the same in the private industry.
Amazing. And do we have it?
David, there was another question you didn't completely furnish, which was from Lorna earlier. I'm quite curious as well. I know you're still gonna fly. You're gonna be a pilot, so I can see you with your own private plane, you know. But what I'm gonna ask is, yeah, what tweaked or what kind of clicked in your brain to say, no, actually, I know I'm gonna fly, but finance is what I'm gonna do.
So it's interesting is that when I was when I was younger, there was two things. Being a pilot was one of them, but I always had this idea of myself in a suit with a suitcase. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. It was always suit and suitcase. I didn't know what that meant. But to me, it meant
You like the look.
yeah. To me, it meant
I know
business.
I'm laughing at this. I
Yeah, it was just an idea of me. It was just like having a suit with a suitcase, business. I didn't know what that business meant. I didn't know what that was going to look like.
Well, David, you are the business. You are
Business
the wrong
man,
place.
business.
Yeah.
And then I
like
think
that.
it just kind of just evolved from there. So beginning again. So I studied. So when I was at school, I did study business management and then I also studied economics. And I think those were the kind of two business type modules that I had in my head. And so then when I was thinking about university, I didn't want to do accounting. For me, business management was a bit too, it was kind of a bit too theory based. I did it and I was like, yeah, this is interesting, but I don't know, it's not, it's not pulling my heartstrings really. And so yeah, then as I said before, I didn't do economics because everybody said it was hard, and then I didn't want to do accounting either. So I found that middle ground. And then something else as well that we didn't realize when we go into uni. So I picked finance, but actually once you get into uni, it is very easy to change your degree.
It is.
They don't tell you that. Like,
just apply for whatever, and then when you get in, routine.
Like people were changing mad courses. Like mad courses. I could have switched to economics, and I think I remember actually in my final year. This is a really interesting one. I remember in my final year, because I found economics easier and I enjoyed it a lot more. It was too late at that time to switch to pure economics, but there was another module which was financial economics, which was basically very similar to what I'd been doing up until that point. But then in the final year, they were going to basically have more economics modules. And I remember going to it's not a guidelines counselor, I can't remember the word for it, but she was my lecturer buddy person. So the person I would go to for advice on like my studies. I remember going to her and I said, if I stay doing finance, I'm more likely to get a 2-1. But if I switch to financial economics in this year, I'm more likely to get a first. And I asked her and I said, what do you think is best, a 2-1 in finance or a first in financial economics? She said the finance course, basically because the course had a lot more relevant content, basically. So I was like, okay, I hear you, sir. I did finance, got a 2-1.
Oh my God.
And then basically, I think that helped me in a lot of things, especially in a couple of exams I did after university. But looking back at it in hindsight now, I should have just picked financial economics. Like no one's looking at your CV going finance. Economics. Yeah.
At least you have to make sure. It's better to make sure rather than just presume it's gonna be all right.
Yeah, I think I did learn more from doing finance, but at the end of the day, like looking back now, I was like, give me that first.
Man, And seeing as you're in finance, a personal question
Yes.
and a personal advice. How do you save money? And do you find it, is it something that comes natural for you, if like in terms of like savings and things like that? Because I know in our community, these are things that people don't talk about. It's like,
Yeah.
and I just want to make this normal, that people talk about their finances and be like, give us tips on how to do finances, how to get on the property ladder. I mean, yeah, but then the whole idea of your budget, like what are your tips? Like what can the young people take? What can I take from?
Very,
Everyone
very
take
good.
notes.
Yeah, very, very good question and point. Thank you for bringing this up. And I'll be honest with you. I have struggled with that concept until a bit more recently in my life. And I will be honest with you there.
Yeah.
I think when I was at uni, you're kind of going a bit crazy with your spending. And I think usually in that particular period of your life, you're probably not paying as much attention to it. I think you should.
Yes.
And when you do, you have less damage to repair in later on. And then as I started working, the first thing, because I went into my overdraft bit at university, and then when I started working, I was finally able to kind of come out of it. But then I went back into it at a period. I think it was around the time that I went to Glasgow, and then I was able to get out of it again. But what I have done more recently, so I've been in the last year and a half, or in the last year or so, I've made very big strides. My mindset has changed completely in the last year and a half. So I've just become very aggressive. My tip, my mom has always had good advice on this. My personal tip is, when let's say you're getting paid monthly or whatever, let's say, don't say to yourself, okay, you're going to then move this amount. So I've just set up like an automatic direct debit to go into my savings account. And I've made that number fairly-ish painful.
Yes.
I've made it fairly painful. And so what that basically does is it removes, because if you decide to do it manually yourself, you're less likely to do it, and you're more likely to change that number. So let's say you decide that you're going to put away £100 every month. Let's say you decide that.
Yeah.
You're doing it manually. Let's say that it comes to do it, you'll be like, nah, I need to do a few things.
Okay, I can get an Uber to that next one, get a takeaway,
Yeah. Step number one, set it up automatically. Let it go, right? So once that's gone, and I've made it a bit, so what I don't know if this is the best route to go, but basically the way I did it was, I would take away a massive chunk, and then I would try to spend within the means of what was left. And so at the very beginning, sometimes I wouldn't match that, and I would still go under that. And so I would maybe have to then go into the savings to pull some back. But at least I was still sending away a fairly big chunk. So that was what I was doing at the beginning. And then it got to a point where I decided that I was going to be extra harsh on myself. I was going to be extra harsh on myself and not touch it at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's gone. If I don't live within this means, I'm gonna go into my overdraft, and I'm gonna get hit with those charges. And so it happened a couple of like months or so. And then it got to a point where I was like, actually, I don't really want to get hit with these charges anymore. So I'm just gonna force myself. So I basically put myself in the position where mentally I just got to the point where I was like, I don't want to get charged anymore. And so now that's how I've been able to do it. So I did it aggressively. I did it automatically. And then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I was spending a little bit more, so I was taking some back. And then it got to a point where I was like, nope, I'm going to be aggressive with this. I'm going to stick with this. I don't want to get eaten up with those charges, because every time, you get eaten up with those like charges, it hits you. But then what I was realizing as well was that even if you do like hit those charges, when like say like your next paycheck or whatever comes in, at least that full amount that you sent away was sent away, and you haven't touched it.
Yes.
So that was a personal way that I have, and because I've been so aggressive with it, I've made a lot of strides this year, and that's actually something I'm personally very happy about. So I'm really glad that you brought this up, because it's a very, very good point. It is completely a mindset thing.
Yeah,
Because I remember before, it's completely a mindset thing. Before, I was like, how am I going to save this month? I was thinking like, I've got this, I've got this to do, but you start personally just curbing something, like you start curbing some takeaways here and there, you start curbing some Ubers here and there, you're not doing as much, like you start to navigate yourself around it. So once you put yourself into the mindset that this is happening, get used to it, it
Yes.
changes it. But that's a very personal thing, and again, it took me a while. It's something that I've only really started being really good with in the last maybe year and a half or so. But yeah, it's a very, very good, very important point.
Totally. Yeah, finances are like talking. I always say they're a skill, you know.
Mom strategy.
We want to hear your mom's strategy.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give some of the trade. So she would say, whatever you get, split it into percentages and say, this percent is going to be saved. This percent is what is going to be attributed for, let's say, like food, for example, like living expenses. This is going to be good for rent. This is going to be for whatever, and this is going to be for fun. And if you're able to split it into those sections, you will start to know when you're going, over and above certain sessions. But to have that, you can also use that as a tool to have that rigidness. So if you're getting X amounts, it's like, okay, this is the percentage that's getting saved. This is the percentage that's going to food and for sustenance, rent, until the end of the month. And then this is what I will apportion myself to enjoy myself, have fun. Takeaways can be in there as well. So some people might find that better to say, okay, yes. And then they know that, okay, if I've gone through half of what I intended for fun in the first 7 weeks, in the first 7 days, then you know you're off track.
Yeah, it just becomes a microscope.
I wanted to ask with you guys, I do a similar thing to what you guys do, but do you guys have a goal? So let's say if you can
have a goal, you can say, okay, I want to save up for a house, I want to save up for a car and all this. But I think also I think just saving to have that for a rainy day is super important, because then you have situations like what you just said. Let's say a sibling comes, it's like, oh, I need this. Then you know that you can help them out. I think importantly as well, I think it goes back to what we're saying about life coming in cycles. It's similar to, let's say you're on a good streak and, let's say there's more money coming in at a specific time, in a specific period of your life. It's very easy to think that, hey, this is going to last forever. And it might do, you don't know that. But on the instance where things turn down, coronavirus is a perfect example of that. If you look at all these restaurants, a lot of places are having to close down. Like if you were to ask these people a year ago, do you think that this would happen? Like they would say no. They've gone for months without having any sort of revenue, and you would never really think that a pandemic would hit like that. It's not part of your plans. And so having that saving for a rainy day, having something saved up for a rainy day, is super, super important, because life is unpredictable. You just don't know. So I think saving for goals is important, and saving for savings in a rainy day is also important.
The other thing that you also mentioned was when you're breaking down the money, have the fun account. I think it was a tip that I learned from Martin Lewis, I would say.
Oh, really?
The way I look at it is I'm spending 8-9 hours of my life working. Why not enjoy it at the same time? But as you said, it's a percentage.
Yes. It's a percentage, which is we'll highlight that, the percentage, because then it gives you the flexibility of, if I'm getting, let's say if you're on 20K a year, you know that you've got a percentage of how much you can spend. It then gives you an opportunity to say, okay, I can afford to go to one festival this year, and then I can afford to go to a movie once a month. I can afford to take my partner once out a month. But then it then means you're working with percentages and not, percentages make you, if anything, they motivate you Because
Yeah.
if you then wanna go to movies and take your partner twice a month, you then have to expand your income for you.
Yeah. We want bigger percentages.
Yeah, you want bigger percentages, put in the hours. But yeah, listen, this has been so informative and really
I know. I've
really
taken
therapeutic
quite a lot.
again.
Hey, no, thanks. Honestly, thanks for having me. Genuinely, really wanted to get involved. Really happy to be
Yes.
here and speak to all of you. And genuinely really happy to be here. So thanks for inviting me.